Why did you quit your last job? I was the company's first employee. It started with just me and the owner working from his living room. He promised me as the company grew so would my paycheck. 2 years later, I am running the whole back end of the company out of 2 warehouses and he is running the front end and doing the administration side. As he travels the world I step up and run it all. He bought his wife and father each a Lexus. I was still living with my grandparents and driving an old beat-up car because I couldn't even afford a studio apartment anywhere in our county, but my annual review was coming and since the company and his pay had grown exponentially, I expected a large raise. My annual review was nothing short of perfect, but all I got was a 25 cents per hour raise. It was bull asterisk 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 asterisk. He cried when I gave him my notice, but in my opinion, he kind of asked for it. I would have gladly stayed if he kept his word and my pay really had grown as the business did. After I left apparently there was a power struggle with all the employees in both warehouses all fighting over who would be in my position and it fell apart. He begged me to come back and help it get under control again, but that was a big no. If you don't reward those who take you to the summit, the problems that appear when they walk away will avalanche you down deep in the valley. That's a good quote, friend. I was being stalked and my boss kept making me work alone. Stalker cornered me and only left when customers kept coming in. That was it for me. I used to bartend at a local brewery. I drove 30 minutes to and from work, so 1 hour round trip. They started scheduling me 3-hour shifts back to back to back. I requested more hours and the bar manager said, "I'll see what I can do." Then she left because she was overworked, and the new bar manager kept my schedule the same. I asked her and she said, "No, you don't priority just because you drive." I put my 2 weeks in and said it wasn't worth it. She then started nitpicking every tiny thing I did wrong and scolded me every opportunity she could. I quit a week early. Working in hospitality, in a restaurant bar eventually takes its toll on you. The customers who come in are hungry, many of them hangry, and what happens if you give them a couple of beers on an empty stomach and then the vile poison that comes out of their mouth that they direct in your general direction when back of house fucks up their order, or it comes late, or they lose the ticket is generally utterly unwarranted, and if I could have recorded their rants and send it to their own mothers, I guarantee that she would have came down and whipped their arse with a belt. Eventually you just think fuck it, I'm out. My managers were creating a toxic environment and making it impossible to function in the office. Too much blatant favoritism and one of the managers was too fake. I fucking hate this shit. It truly is other people that make me hate working, most jobs themselves are fine. I had 20 years, a supervisor who had been trying for 15 years to provoke me into a response he could fire me for, management was backing him up and trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. We'd been working from home for 2 years during the pandemic and they mandated a return to premises during a massive COVID outbreak in the area. So I took 3 weeks of accumulated vacation. At the end of the first week, I took back anything I had that was theirs, and turned in my resignation. 2 weeks later I applied for retirement benefits. Fuck you people and the broken personalities you rode in on. I'm out. It's a year later and they still haven't been able to find anyone who knows how to do my job. Money laundering, boss got arrested on the clock and fled, tip and wage theft, etc. Final straw is when I was asked to reschedule my cancer screening for a shift I wasn't even originally scheduled for at a coffee shop. Things bout to turn into boss theft auto. 10 years without a promotion, mostly because people found me too valuable in the position I was in. This was about 12 years ago. I was working as a guard for a major security company and they treated me like dog shit. The local management would ensure your hours did not exceed not even a minute of overtime by having you come in later or earlier depending on the shifts. One time I missed work entirely because of some flooding on the streets to get to my post. My friend's car didn't make it and we had to call his brother to come pick us up in a bigger truck around midnight as we stood in standing water and my boots were soaked. I was looking at the prospect of joining the military and once word got around they were scrambling to ask me more information about my plans and needed to see if there would be a replacement. They were already geared up to reassign me to a different post with less hours for having someone on the site mention my business. I lied and told them that I talked to a recruiter but was already well into the process. One of the employees at the post we were contracted to do security with was a raging bitch and would play the same songs every single night for years when she was on shift. She would send complaints to the company and her boss about guards checking their phones, eating lunch, or even in the colder months we shared a small building that had a heater and she would complain that we needed to be outside on watch. She was a miserable woman. That same woman was capable of triggering a paid 1-hour meeting, regardless of all shifts that worked that day. Downtown and nearly a 1-hour-long commute for all parties involved. The corporate office for our manager to call us a bunch of pussies and that we should stand up to her whenever she starts doing stuff to harass us. Completely unproductive and no solutions rendered. When my dad passed away 2 months before I left for basic training, there was no bereavement benefits other than a maximum of 5 days of unpaid leave. For each day that I was out of work I wasn't getting paid. I lived in a trailer with just above minimum wage and every check left me with just enough to carry Little Caesars pizza and hamburger helper meals. Every day there wasn't money made would set me back days or weeks. 6 days after the service I was standing at my post in the middle of the night in a wind tunnel when I just had lost my best friend. I submitted my 2 weeks notice, and then the next day I didn't show up to work and told them I was dropping my uniforms off at the corporate office. They told me I was non-rehirable and I laughed pretty hard and told them I wouldn't want to work for them if I was desperate. Because I realized it's not normal or reasonable to want to kill everyone including myself just by seeing a car of the same brand my boss had. If I ever see that man again, I'll cascade vomit him in the face. You too, hey? Sorry. I can empathize. Literally had panic attacks every time I saw a vehicle that resembled my former boss and manager's vehicles. I'm through that part now, but still angry about it almost 2 years later. I still occasionally indulge in fantasies about doing horrible things to them. Same. I truly believe a lot of these people are just evil bastards who strive to be managers/supervisors solely to bring others down. They're like human parasites. I was a Marine deployed in Afghanistan. We did door to door while a sniper was protecting our asses. My friend, I will just call him Dan, opened one door. There was a child covering something on his hands. Dan opened his hand. It was a grenade stuck to his hand with glue covered all over. 5 seconds later I saw my friend's face get blasted. I was traumatized. 1 month after I went home for good. About 5 years later I also moved to Brussels to get a better life. Now I am a JR programmer and a sort of master in robotics. I was feeling a lot of stress and depression from the job. I was in the middle of nowhere and had moved there from a place where I was closer to family and friends. Suddenly I was in this place where I realized I didn't connect to a lot of the people. Fast forward to around the time I was making the choice to leave, and I overheard one of my coworkers bad-mouthing me. What was worse was they were also saying this in front of students, which is just incredibly unprofessional. So knowing there was negativity towards me, an unprofessional environment, and already being so done with the place for other reasons, I had to leave. Also, that asshole got a better job somewhere else that would be considered a promotion and I really wanted to sabotage it somehow, but I decided to just leave it be. But honestly, she's going to fuck someone else over IMO. I had extreme visibility to a CEO who surrounded himself with yes men and couldn't take any kind of actual feedback. Him and his leadership team would make large and visible mistakes only to then force the rest of us to make up the lost revenue. So in general, a complete lack of leadership. My weekly one-on-one meetings with my boss were just large venting sessions about the people she couldn't convince to change, improve, or do anything, and they never ended in anything productive. Working as a teacher is a nightmare, at least for 90% of the districts out there. I only found that out after the fact though. You go into it going, I'm good at teaching, really enjoy it, and I'm good at keeping a group of kids engaged in a lesson, I should feel right at home, and then they pile 6+ hours of extra work bullshit that you have to somehow do before the next day, on top of teaching a class for 7 hours a day, come in. They never explicitly tell you to do things outside of work, they just give you an unreasonable deadline and a laughable amount of time during the day to actually do things, not to mention they booked meetings during most of that time anyways. I was coming into work every morning more tired than when I left the day before. Since I was one of the more recent hires and my school had low enrollment, the district was going to relocate me to one of the bad schools that most teachers avoid like the plague. I told them I'd rather just quit instead, and a day later I was free. Crappy pay. Understaffed. If we needed 10 people for a job, it wasn't unusual to only have 7 or 8. Morale was extremely low because of the lack of work-life balance, bad pay, and nepotistic good old boy management that treated people like children. Boss was like 2 years older than me and didn't like me because I had more education than him and better people skills. His management style was to chill in his office doing who knows what and have a couple computer monitors up with different camera views of the entire warehouse. Kept applying and eventually found a job that paid like 60% more. I needed to increase my salary, get away from toxic coworkers, and to have a wider variety of tasks to do. Starting my new position in about a week. Hoping it goes well and suits me better. My boss was awful. She spoke down to everyone, she bitched about every single employee behind their backs to me, and I have a really weird feeling she did it about me too. I would be so anxious before a shift because I never knew if I was walking in to find a happy boss or someone who was ready to scream the shop down. When I had a meeting with her and explained why she made me want to quit, she started crying and trying to guilt/manipulate me into staying. I'm ashamed to say it worked, for another few months anyway. I eventually emailed in my resignation and didn't see her ever again. Quit my sales job of 8 years today. Felt like I had nowhere left to grow, and I got to a point where I didn't care about the job at all anymore due to burnout. Have a work-from-home job lined up making 5 figures a month that I have begun about 9 months ago, and I can't be any more excited for the next chapter. The CEO was indicted for lying to investors and other fraud, plus they made me work a lot of weekends/nights with almost no notice. The last nail was getting a call Thanksgiving weekend on Friday telling me we need some big changes to our website by Monday. Got them all done, but put in my notice like a week later. Boss kept telling me I was next in line to promote, then would promote someone else, not teach them the job, and put them on closings with me where I would end up teaching them parts of their job. This combined with the fact that the boss would convince people to open up to her with their problems just so she could use them to manipulate them. I couldn't handle walking in to see my supervisors crying anymore. Couldn't take it over the boss's head as she was friends with her boss, so I left. She got demoted shortly after I left, but has since been promoted again to manage a different store. Apparently this is at least her third round of demotion and repromotion. They hired me knowing that I was underqualified for the position because they were desperate for workers. They refused to properly train me, and when I made my first significant fuck up I was screamed at and then kicked off the project to go work with a different manager. A few months later, when we were forced to work from home, this other manager would spend all day every day berating me over Teams. I wasn't even allowed to use the washroom without accusations of intentionally ignoring him, and lunch was a complete no-go. I'd have to wait until after work, which on some nights I was forced to work until 8:30 p.m. It got to the point where I was logging off feeling like absolute shit about myself, and when I started taking it out on people around me I knew it was time to quit. All of that while I was being insultingly underpaid, with a commute that was at minimum 2 hours but on most nights it was 3. The only reason we worked from home was because the government forced them to make that decision. Otherwise I'd have to go in every day. Long story short, my manager didn't accept responsibility from a problem that arose after I handled a problem the way she told me, which also followed policy. HR wound up getting involved, and I was found to be completely in the right. The manager, angry that she told off by the owners for letting it happen and essentially trying to let me hang for it, kept looking for ways to make me quit. I found another job, and had an interview on my day off. They hired me the morning after and I never looked back. Was transferred to the worst location in my city because I was calling out other people's bullshit. My new manager expected me to work like I was on salary even though I was hourly, basically wanting me to be in several places at once because she refused to schedule more people during my shifts, and getting everything she wanted done would have required at least an hour of overtime every night, which she wouldn't sign off on. Was berated for not being able to time travel. The store lost thousands of dollars worth of product because date checks weren't being done. I found expired stuff from the previous year. Manager tried to deny my vacation time that had been approved months before my transfer. Decided to put in my 2 weeks when I was written up for something that happened while I was off. I told night crew to keep an eye on frozen temps as the freezers started dropping at the end of my shift. They dropped the ball and I got the blame, but ended up quitting without notice when the manager started demanding over the intercom that I clock in early and help her. Hit the subscribe button to get notified of every video I upload. Thanks for watching.